Now, on to a high point of our evening and our signature event, the honoring of our 2020 Scientist of the Year. Each year, we honor an outstanding local scientist who has made a significant difference in his or her field and has contributed to science in a meaningful way. This year, we asked 4 of our former Scientist of the Year honorees to make that decision for us, and I think we got the very best. Please join me in welcoming Dr. Ben Cravat, a Scripps Research scientist, who will introduce Dr. Paul Schimmel, our 2020 Scientist of the Year. Dr. Cravat is a chemist who is affiliated with Scripps Research and is a friend and professional colleague of Dr. Schimmel. He has recently been recognized for his outstanding achievement as a chemist in cancer research. Dr. Jamie Williamson, Executive Vice President of Research and Academic Affairs at Scripps Research, described him as a remarkable scientist whose discoveries in chemistry have been instrumental in identifying new therapeutic drugs for a variety of difficult-to-treat conditions. Congratulations, Dr. Cravat, and welcome.
It is my tremendous pleasure and honor to introduce Paul Schimmel, the Ernest and Jean Hahn Professor of Molecular Medicine and Chemistry at the Scripps Research Institute. Paul is a legend in the fields of biochemistry, biophysics, and biotechnology. He has authored over 500 scientific research publications and is also a co-author of a widely used 3-volume textbook on biophysical chemistry. His research interests focus on how cells interpret and translate genetic information into proteins that serve as the workforce for performing all critical or nearly all critical life processes functions. Through career-long investigations into an ancient and universal set of essential enzymes called the tRNA synthetases, Paul's laboratory has elucidated a universal mechanism for correcting errors in the interpretation of genetic information, and has gone on to show how this mechanism is essential for preventing serious pathologies and diseases. In a separate line of research published back in 1983, Paul developed the concept of what are now known as expressed sequence tags, or ESTs, and the strategy of shotgun DNA sequencing, approaches that several years later were adopted for the Human Genome Project. Nature magazine listed Paul's work on the development of ESTs as one of the 4 key developments that launched the human genome era. Paul has always demonstrated a keen interest and commitment to translating his science into new medicines to treat devastating human diseases. He's a co-founder or founding director of numerous biotechnology companies, including at least 7 NASDAQ-listed enterprises that have developed FDA-approved therapies flowing out of academic research. Lives saved by just one of these medicines are estimated at over 600,000. Currently, one of the companies he founded is engaged in a phase 2 clinical trial for COVID-afflicted patients with a protein in his laboratory discovered to treat inflammatory lung conditions manifesting a cytokine storm. In recognition of Paul's tremendous contributions to basic and clinical research, he has received many honors, including election into the National Academy of Sciences, Medicine, Inventors, and the American Philosophical Society. I wanted to close with some very personal thoughts about Paul. More than any other scientist I know, Paul has served as an incredible mentor to the next generation of researchers interested in seeing their discoveries have a tangible impact on human health. Both through example and generous sharing of time and knowledge, Paul has helped individuals such as myself navigate the complexities of translating basic research discoveries into medicines. This process involves the interests of many parties: the academic scientists and inventors, their home institutions, the companies that license academic discoveries, the investors who fund these companies, and ultimately the patients who stand to benefit from innovative therapies. I have never met an academic researcher more adept than Paul at uniting and leading such a panoply of diverse interest groups toward the shared vision and goal of delivering transformative medicines to humankind. In my previous life as a competitive runner, we used to refer to the best of us as those who could, quote, lead from the middle of the pack. In other words, individuals who were so revered that they could set the pace while letting others around them receive the credit. When I think of this type of extraordinary and selfless leader, I see Paul Schimmel. Paul, my warmest congratulations to you on receiving this special honor of Scientist of the Year from the ARCS Foundation. They could not have selected a more deserving scientist in person. Please join me in welcoming Paul Schimmel.
Thank you so much, Ben, for that very generous introduction. Ben was one of the first faculty members I met when I came to the Scripps a little over 20 years ago. I also want to say I'm very pleased and honored and surprised by this award from the ARCS Foundation. I confess that I did not know about the foundation when I got the call that was being honored in this way. But I quickly got up to speed and realized that they shared an interest with me that they didn't realize my wife and I had, namely supporting and encouraging women in science and their education and progress in science. They had no idea that this has been a long-standing interest of my own, and likewise, I didn't know about their history. I'm just going to talk to you in a conversational way, and hopefully am able to convey to you some ideas, some personal philosophy that hopefully will be meaningful, maybe useful to you. And it is that spirit in which I will try to give you a snippet, not about so much about myself, but what I experienced and what I learned from what I experienced. It was quite a few years ago now. My wife Cleo and I were at a reception, a large reception on Nantucket Island, attended by scientists, research physicians, investors of various sorts, but all congregating to discuss and give talks on life science and biotechnology. Beautiful reception, a perfect early July evening. And I'm standing there with many others, and I can see a very attractive young woman coming across the room and comes up to me. I did not know who she was. And she puts out her arms and she grabs me around the neck and hugs me. I was totally taken aback. And she looked at me and I looked at her and I said, what's this about? And she said, you saved my life. And I said, well, if I saved your life, I think I know that. We would have met in the past. No, she said. I was dying in the hospital and I had a septic infection, not acquired in the hospital where many of them are acquired. I have no idea why. I play tennis, I do this, I do that, but I had to be hospitalized. And they tried the drugs they had, and it turned out they didn't work, and I was dying. So they pulled out Cubicin at the very end, before it was too late. And I was injected with Cubicin, which treats vancomycin-resistant bacterial infections in the bloodstream. And it pulled me through. And here I am tonight. I was quite moved. Cubicin goes back to a company, the third one I had the privilege of co-founding in the early days of biotech with a colleague at MIT, Julius Riebeck, who happens to now be at the Scripps by coincidence. And we were joined by a single venture capitalist, a man named John Clark, who Ben knows very well, much younger. This was 1993. And he put up a few $100,000 to pursue an idea which I had and where I really felt chemistry expertise was needed. We started this little company and eventually were able to develop a medicine, not the what we set out to do, something quite different. And it became known as Cubicin. I asked our CEO at one point, Michael Bonney, who is now the chairman and CEO of, the chairman of Alnylam Pharmaceuticals in Boston, where I've served on the board for many years. I asked him, how many lives do you think have been saved by CubeSynth? This was many years ago I asked this. And he said, well, I'll have to get back to you, Paul. It may take me 2 or 3 weeks. But I'll troll the hospitals in the United States. And he got back to me. He said, well, Paul, in the US, and we're still early in the development or the marketing of the drug, they estimate 300,000 people would not be living today had not you and Julia started this little company. And they cannot count the number, it's in the tens of thousands of amputations that have been spared. But that's the record. Years later, I saw Mike at an Alnylam board meeting. Cubist had been sold in the meantime to Merck. And he said the number now, Paul, is over 600,000 people who would not be living had you not started that company. Again, I found that just worth every effort, worth everything I could imagine, far beyond what I could hope. And yet, as the years have gone by, there have been more and more examples of people being helped in this space, the biotech space. Being at MIT gave me a huge advantage. People today write, speak, and say that Kendall Square, which is right where MIT is located, is to biotechnology what Silicon Valley is to technology. It is a beehive of activity in biotech. But we started very early when it was just getting going. And we saw this great growth. I started in medical school. I went to medical school because I didn't know what else to do. My father was a post-World War I German immigrant who came alone to the US. He had lost 7 or 8 siblings to starvation in the first post-World War period of Germany. The country was in shambles. And he came by himself without a higher formal education through Ellis Island and made his way, as many, many immigrants did, that built our wonderful America. His aspirations, of course, were transferred to his son, and he wanted me to be a doctor. I started in medical school. I got through the first year curriculum, but I found myself maybe leaving the side of a cadaver and finding a corner to read in. I was reading the scientific literature of that time in the area of biophysics. I just couldn't resist. And gathering up stacks and stacks of reprints, which I had to write to the author for. There was no internet. But I finally gave up. And I dropped out of medical school. My father was horrified. One of the compensations by staying in medical school, motivations, was that I wanted to help people. I thought medicine should be a wonderful way to engage people. You might be able to prescribe therapies, identify diagnostically what's wrong, and at least have a personal relationship with your patients, which would be meaningful. So I said to myself, if I practiced medicine for 30 years, I saw maybe 500 patients a year. In 30 years, I'd see 15,000 patients. But with research, not seeing any patients, the leverage is enormous. 600,000 or more with CubeSynth alone, let alone the other medicines that were built and now are being marketed, as well as the tools for the industry that my first company, Repligen, which was a disaster for years and now is a multi-billion-dollar enterprise selling many of the tools for the lab tech industry. And I thought about that, and I felt that I had made the right choice. When people see how much has been achieved, they see these stocks trade on the NASDAQ. Many of them today are worth billions of dollars. I don't think of myself at all taking the credit. I think I got it started, but the building was done by other people. I recall something Elon Musk mentioned a couple of weeks ago, and I'm no Elon Musk. I would never want to be, but someone was kind of criticizing him, unjustifiably, seems to me, for what they said. Well, yes, you did SpaceX, you did Tesla, but it's all these thousands of people that really built the company. You take too much credit. And all he said was, look, there would be no SpaceX. There would be no Tesla had I not started these enterprises, and that's enough for me. Of course, other people did enormous things way beyond me. I think the part that I also take satisfaction from is the thousands of jobs that we've been able to create and how much it has employed people who have enormous purpose and passion for science. But what they need, everybody needs to understand, this costs a huge amount of stress and tension in my life. Nothing was simple. Most of these enterprises, in fact, I think all of them, fell on very hard times and were on the cusp of bankruptcy. The sleepless nights, the battles going on in the boardroom, the phone calls of angry directors or executives or scientists. Repligen, wonderful people, wonderful management. The stock at one point was trading at 50 cents a share. I don't know what it's trading at today exactly, but it's well over $100 a share. Cubist, we were talking about that. I remember when it was $1.38 and going bankrupt. It sold to Merck for over $100 a share. Alkermes, same thing. I remember when it was $1.38. And I'm deeply involved in these enterprises. At the same time, I've got a wonderful lab at MIT, my first love. Graduate students, postdocs, hitting the cover off the ball, teaching graduate student courses, teaching undergraduate courses. When I look back, I see an image that my wife and I will never forget. When we were at MIT the last several years, we lived in a mid-rise condominium on the Charles River. We looked across to the Massachusetts General Hospital complex, Longfellow Bridge, and downtown Boston. We loved it. We didn't like the winter. The winter, the cold was bitter. Ice, snow, and you were cooped up you were locked down as if you were in a COVID situation. Only what you're locked down with is the weather. It is so cold and so unpleasant. Nonetheless, we decided we would like to get out. So on a Sunday in February, cold as anything, Charles River is totally frozen. We got in the car and drove to a portion of Cape Cod to the south that projects out a peninsula and looks at a hole in the water called Woods Hole. Woods Hole is a hole between submerged rocks in a channel that runs between the Cape and Martha's Vineyard, water flowing from a part of the ocean called Buzzards Bay into Vineyard Sound and Nantucket Sound to the east and on to Europe. We walked out there because it's interesting there. And when the tide is running, Woods Hole is roaring. The water is roaring. We watched a beautiful boat one night in the early evening as we took one of our strolls. A supposedly knowledgeable crew went through the hole and sunk the boat. Beautiful boat, sunk. However, this was even more interesting. We looked out and we were astonished. We saw something that reminded me of how I felt in those dark days with almost all these companies. We saw a fox on an ice floe that had been an iceberg. The fox was looking for food and walked out. And the bird broke off. And that was an ice floe roaring along, no way to control anything. And that fox, with the splashing waves all around him, was absolutely terrified. I thought of them many times with these companies. I felt like that. Everything is failing. There's anger all around me. And I somehow always came back to one of my most poignant verses from the old Bob Seger song, Against the Wind. I wish I didn't know now what I didn't know then. And I knew that fox probably was thinking the same thing. He thought he was going to get food, went out in the iceberg, and it broke off. This, I believe, is the price you pay to build these companies. There is no other way. And at the same time, the reward from the standpoint of human satisfaction and knowing that when you do pass away, there are many people who have not passed away because you worked hard to start something that due mostly to the effort of others eventually. I'll get them going, but others have really got to do a lot of work, thousands of them, to make it happen. In this process, my wife and I became very aware, especially in the early days at MIT, of the disadvantaged position that women were in science. When I started MIT, I was a 26-year-old puppy, just before my 27th birthday. And by the next year, 27, turning 28, I had 11 people in the lab. Of those 11 people, only one was a woman. And I felt all my heart for her. The isolation, the fear, and yet the strong will to make the effort to finish the program, to do science, and to go on and have a productive life. So we decided, Cleo and I, that we would like very much to do all we could with our resources to help women. So 20 years ago, I did not prepare this slide. MIT prepared it. They're having a celebration of the 20th year of the Schimmel Scholars Program at MIT. We put up this money to endow scholarships that would fund one female graduate student per year, all her costs, for 4 years. So at any time now, we have 4, and they graduate. It keeps rolling. So now we're up to about 20 women over these years that have gone through. And they're having a celebration and this sort of thing, which I did not ask for, but they're doing it anyway. I have to say this. I am astonished at how well MIT manages endowed funds. Astonished. They grow those funds as well as any top money manager in the country. So they have grown what we give them to keep up easily with costs. About the same time, we did another program at our undergraduate institution where we met. This is Ohio Wesleyan University. I actually had never seen the university or visited Ohio before I went there. I was not much of a student. I was a street kid. I was not interested in studies. I was pretty much grown up by the time I was 15. I always felt that was my true education for life. So my mother told me to apply to this school. She felt it could tame me a bit, get me out of my environment. And she visited the school. And then she came back and I got accepted. She bought a Greyhound ticket, a duffel bag, stuffed the duffel bag with clothes, put me on the bus and sent me out to Ohio. I got out there and I found my wife, Cleo, who was an Ohio girl. We got married as undergraduates. And we've continued on the path. Well, these fellowships are for women, but now we have decided we'll expand to the other gender. So this we have just done, and we will do more for Scripps. And this is not female specific, but we're very excited about this program. All of these endowments are gifts that keep giving. We're very excited about this one now, and we are very much looking forward to engaging more in the future with all of you. Thank you very much.
Paul, thank you. That was absolutely wonderful. I want to thank you once again for such a wonderful contribution scientifically and philanthropically to our world, and to the ARCS Foundation for recognizing rightly everything that you've done. And so I'll turn it back over now to you to perhaps thank the ARCS once again. So,
well, I want to thank folks for participating. I very much hope that you can develop the passion and interest in supporting women in science. And I thank you for putting up with me and a little bit of Ben for this event. I enjoyed it a great deal, and I am very honored and pleased and humbled in a way, really am, because so many good people in San Diego who would deserve such recognition as well. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Schimmel. We are delighted to have you as our 2020 Scientist of the Year. Dr. Cravat, thank you for that wonderful introduction of Dr. Schimmel. It's terrific to see that the two of you have been friends and colleagues over the years. And Dr. Schimmel, your remarks were really impressive. I did not know that you and your wife had been such supporters of women in STEM. And so it's all the more wonderful to be recognizing you tonight as our Scientist of the Year, because we too recognize scholars in STEM.